Chapter 4. The Lords of Smash Repair. Quote from Epictetus: "Give me by all means the shorter and nobler life, instead of the one that is longer but of less account." Time is an infinite, relentless, unstoppable force that drives on with or without you. Time is like water. You only start to appreciate it when it seems to be in short supply and you are thirsty for more. When this appreciation occurs, it means you understand in a profound way that your life is closer to its end rather than its beginning. This end may come in decades, years, months, minutes, or seconds from now. Time had now become Jason Farrelly's most feared foe and strongest ally. Time was his enemy because it forced him to act. Yet it was his friend because it forced him to act with great speed and precision, and every act had to count now. As he looked out of the second-story motel window onto a tranquil street, he could hear and feel a clock ticking. He wasn't dying of any disease, and there was no contract out on his life that he knew of. Instinctively, deep down, he just knew a clock was ticking. Now he knew what Devlin Davies was reaching for and trying to grasp at all those months ago. As he sat on a chair staring out of the window, Farrelly watched a man and woman stroll by his motel, laughing in the morning heat. Thanks to his new awareness of time, Farrelly understood that people like those two, who have little drive for discovering what's over the horizon, laugh in the confidence of knowing that they will live long, uneventful lives. Farrelly turned away and pulled his phone out of his shorts pocket and read the text message just sent to him from his mate Sam Camden. Camden had been helping him out with his business ventures there in Townsville, Queensland, which is home to a large Defence Force contingent and had been Farrelly's home for a few years when he served in the regular army. After many years away from this tropical town, Farrelly had been visiting the place quite often over the last few months, mostly for business. Sam's message said he was running late and would be there in half an hour. Great. Now I have to sit and wait in this miserable philosophical state that I'm in, Farrelly muttered. The cold bottle of orange juice that Farrelly grabbed off the table in front of him went down so well he drank half the bottle's contents in one go. He'd worked up quite a thirst earlier that morning as he did his ritualistic morning exercise. He swam laps inside the stinger nets down at the beach and finished with some push-ups and sit-ups in the park. Suddenly, someone banged hard on his door as he put the juice bottle back down on the table. The knocking was barely audible over the sound of power saws. All week, Farrelly had been woken early by workmen using power tools as they refurbished other rooms. Without taking off the security chain, Farrelly opened the door just enough to see who was there. Standing right up against the door was Topo, a tall, dark-skinned guy with curly hair and wearing a singlet and shorts. Behind him was his partner Samson, a short, stocky Torres Strait Islander. "Let us in, mate," Topo said with a hint of hostility in his voice. "What do you want? I'm just about to go out." "Let us in, mate. We've got something for you." As soon as the chain had been unhooked from the door, the two visitors pushed their way into the standard room. All three men grabbed a seat at the white plastic table under the window. Topo sat opposite Farrelly on his left, next to the window. Samson sat on Farrelly's right, with the television behind him. Both men had been introduced to Farrelly by Camden, along with a few other colourful local characters. 6 months ago, Farrelly had started working for the notorious Lord family of Melbourne, who at the minute were in the middle of a Shakespearean family power struggle to see who would control the Lord criminal empire. Recently, one branch of the Lord family tree, the branch Farrelly was aligned to, had been looking at different illegal avenues in which to make money. That's when Farrelly came up with the suggestion of trafficking arms. There had been a thriving black market for weapons, ammunition and explosives in the Townsville area for as long as Laverack Barracks had been in town. Along with missing army property, arms and illegal goods were either shipped or flown into the top end of Australia secretly by way of Papua New Guinea. Being aware of this market, Farrelly raised the idea with Nathan Lord of buying arms from up north for a fair price, then transporting the goods down south to sell for plenty. This was where Sam Camden had come into the story, and the two sitting in front of Farrelly. The body language of Topo and Samson was very different to their usual laid-back, happy-go-lucky style of past meetings. As the Hoods stared at the Melburnian, they appeared edgy and aggressive and sat upright in their chairs. "So what's so important?" Farrelly asked, annoyed. "Mate, we can get our hands on some AKs if you're interested," Topo stated. "Yeah, no shit," Farrelly replied, knowing that this was a lie. As long as Farrelly had been running this arms racket, these two crooks had delivered little. All they had produced were some shotguns, hunting rifles and smoke grenades. Aware that they were not there to sell weapons, Farrelly decided to humour them for a while until he could work out what was going on. "Yeah, they're stashed not far from here," said Topo. "Well, let's go and have a look at them then," Farrelly suggested. "Yeah, nah, can't. We need money up front first." "Well, fellas, the thing is, I want to see these gats before I hand over any money," Farrelly explained. Not happy with this development, the two crooks gave Farrelly dirty looks. "Come on, mate, you know us. We've done business before. You can trust us," Topo stated as if he was offended. The Crims were becoming more agitated, and they constantly looked at each other and out the window. Topo's knee was bouncing up and down as he spoke. "What about the cash Camden owes us?" "What's that?" Farrelly inquired, unable to hear Topo's questions thanks to the screaming saws in the room next door. "Camden owes us money. We think you should pay up for him." "I don't think so, fellas." "But we're owed money." "Not by me, you're not." Just before this tense meeting was about to come to its inevitable violent conclusion, Farrelly's phone vibrated in his pocket again. It was another message from Camden. The message was a warning. From the quick glance at the phone screen, Farrelly gathered that there was a local contract out on him. Unbeknown to Farrelly, a day earlier someone shady had flown up from Melbourne, met with some local criminals and put a price on his life. Modern technology had ensured the word of the contract had gotten around the small Townsville underworld fast. As Topo and Samson had a mumbled conversation between themselves, Farrelly texted a message back to Camden. He laughed as he placed the phone back in his pocket. Over the last couple of years, Farrelly had taken some big risks in Australia and overseas, but always come up trumps and always with something to show for it. However, for the last few nights, he'd been woken by the thought that his season in the sun was soon coming to a close. As he looked at the two Crims in front of him, he wondered if these guys were the ones who would turn those nagging notions into reality. He chuckled. "What's funny?" asked Samson. Before answering, Farrelly leant forward in his chair and placed his elbows on his knees. "Life is funny, my friend." Without another word, everybody in the motel room understood what was going on. As Topo and Samson looked at each other in another unspoken conversation, Farrelly reached under the tablecloth, hanging over the table's edge. Without taking his eyes off the crooks, he put his right hand onto the pistol grip of the double-barrelled, sawn-off shotgun he had taped under the table. The shotgun was loaded for occasions such as this. As a howling power saw started up again, Samson sprang up from his chair and reached under his gut for the pistol tucked in the front of his shorts. As he got his hand on the weapon's grip, Farrelly tilted the table up a fraction with the shotgun's help and pulled the trigger. Bits of plastic and cloth from the table went flying. Lead shot from one barrel of the sawn-off caught Samson in the lower stomach. This sent him staggering back, tripping over his chair. As he fell to the ground, he smashed his head on the bench the television was on, knocking him out. Topo jumped up with a small caliber pistol in his hand. Farrelly swung the chewed-up table and shotgun around, in line with the armed man who was slightly to his left. Boom! Crack! After the exchange of gunfire, Farrelly was pushed backwards off his chair, landing on his back. He rolled over onto his right and came to rest beside the double bed. Knowing he'd been hit, Farrelly desperately reached under a pillow on the bed for his trusty pistol. Topo grimaced in pain as he sat on the carpet clutching his stomach with both hands, his pistol beside him. A couple of metres away, leaning back against the bed, Farrelly aimed his pistol at the centre of Topo's torso and discharged the weapon twice. Not sure of Samson's status, and with not much to aim at, he put 2 rounds into the unconscious man's chest. There was no pain coming from the wound above Farrelly's right hip, just a lot of blood, as he found out when he put his hand down to check the damaged area. His t-shirt was soaked. Lightheadedness and nausea informed Farrelly he was going into shock. His body was restricting the blood flow to vital areas only. Having felt this before, Farrelly steadied his breathing and focused on what had to be done to avoid passing out. He needed to stay conscious. While he was still sitting against the bed, dormant first aid training resurfaced in Farrelly's mind. He reached around on his lower back, trying to locate an exit wound. He found one and felt instant relief, knowing the round had left his body. Satisfied he wasn't wounded seriously or going to die, Farrelly reached for the phone in his pocket and rang Camden. "What's going on, mate?" "I've been shot." "Shit. I'll be there in a few minutes. Hold on," replied Sam Camden. As the stench of urine and faeces flowing from the dead men filled the hotel room, muscular Sam Camden bounded up the outside staircase 2 steps at a time. In his right hand he had a 9mm pistol. Surprised at the lack of activity around the motel, considering what he thought had just taken place, Camden approached Farrelly's room cautiously. Standing away from the door, he knocked on it and then called out, "Jace, it's me, Sam." After hearing his mate call him in, Camden turned the doorknob slowly. He swung open the door and stepped into the room with the pistol raised in both hands. Directly in front of him, Camden could see the motionless bodies of 2 horizontal, bloodied men. He approached the bodies and proceeded to clear the criminals' weapons. Once he'd done this, Camden made his way to Farrelly, who was pale and sitting in a pool of his own blood beside the bed. "You all right?" "Nah, I don't reckon." "Don't worry, mate, I'll get you out of here," Camden promised as he went to help his wounded friend to his feet. "Grab all my gear first," Farrelly suggested calmly. Taking out a sharp-bladed folding knife from the back pocket of his shorts, Camden hacked off the shotgun still stuck to the table, which was now lying on its side under the window. He threw the weapon into Farrelly's bag, which was on the bench, already packed. He threw the black bag over his shoulder, then made his way over to his mate and lifted him up carefully from under the armpits. With one arm over Camden's shoulders and a hand over his wound, Farrelly made his way on wobbly legs downstairs to a red Daihatsu parked in the street in front of the motel. Camden unlocked and opened the Daihatsu's front passenger door with his free arm and helped his injured mate into the vehicle. Once Farrelly was in the front seat, Camden went to the car's boot. While Farrelly was trying to get as comfortable as possible, Camden threw the black bag into the boot and took out a can of petrol and some old clothes, then slammed the boot lid shut. Through the open driver's side window, Camden threw the clothes at Farrelly. "Put those over the wound to stop the bleeding," instructed Camden. "These are fucking filthy. They'll kill me by infection," Farrelly cried as he inspected the clothes in his lap. Ignoring his mate, Sam Camden headed back into the motel. Still surprised at the lack of movement around the motel, he went back into the crime scene and poured the can of petrol over everything in the room, working his way back to the door. On the threshold of room 45, Camden took out his lighter and set the joint ablaze. Once back downstairs, he made his way to the Daihatsu and jumped in the driver's seat. As Sam Camden drove the Daihatsu up the street, he looked in his rear vision mirror and saw smoke billowing out of some of the motel windows. "Let's see him get evidence out of that mess," Camden stated proudly. "Couldn't convict me anyway," Farrelly commented from a relaxed state. "Why is that?" "The last man standing always rules the crime scene," replied Farrelly. 6 months earlier. Quote from Julius Caesar. "My aim is to outdo others in justice and equity, as I have previously striven to outdo them in achievement." Bills, bills, fucking bills. Even though Farrelly no longer had financial problems, this didn't mean corporations and governments still require their skim off the top of his earnings like the ultimate racketeers they were. That's why he was off to his local shopping centre in his blacked out ute, to pay bills and keep the corporate bandits off his back for another month. At a busy set of lights, as he was waiting to do a right-hand turn into a large shopping complex, Farrelly drifted off. He thought back to the long holiday in Costa Rica he'd just returned from. A split second after getting a green arrow, the woman in the car behind him beeped her horn, demanding he move on. Pissed off, Farrelly threw the black ute into the intersection. Suddenly he hit his brakes. Flying through the lights was a guy on a road motorbike and in a black and red race suit. The bike rider was upright in the bike's saddle with his hand out, commanding Farrelly to stop. Wondering what was going on, Farrelly glanced up at the traffic lights and saw he still had a green arrow. By the time he looked back into the intersection, the bike rider was shaking his fist at him as he rode off into the distance. Now in a vile mood, Farrelly drove through the intersection and 100 metres down the road entered the shopping centre's car park. He parked his ute nose out, way up one end of the car park. After exiting his vehicle and walking 3/4 of the way through the car park, for some unknown reason, Farrelly decided to turn around and check his four-wheel drive. What he saw next made him stop in his tracks. Standing next to his vehicle with his helmet in his hand was the motorcycle rider from a few minutes before. Farrelly sprinted back through the lot. Before he could reach his prized possession, the blonde-haired bike rider had kicked a dent in the ute's front passenger door. Satisfied with his effort, the motorcyclist was about to put his helmet back on when he spotted a blur in his peripheral vision. The bike rider copped a straight right hand with all of Farrelly's 90 kilos behind it. Poleaxed, he lay groggy on the ground next to the black Ford. Blood oozed from a large gash on his right cheekbone. Without thinking, Farrelly proceeded to give the prone bike rider a few weighty stomps to the ribcage and finished with 4 well-aimed stomps to the head. Not satisfied with the damage done to the motorcyclist, with explosive power, Farrelly pushed the expensive race bike onto its side. The motorbike made a loud crash as it hit the asphalt. Still not content, Farrelly clicked open his vehicle and opened the back passenger side door, where a toolbox was sitting on the floor. From it he grabbed a hammer. As he swung away like a maniac, smashing the bike to pieces, shoppers passed by without doing or saying a thing. Also saying nothing as he paced up and down outside his large smash repair workshop was Doug Lord, the drug lord. That's what he was dubbed by the tabloid media the one time he showed up on their radar. In a tailored blue suit, he puffed on a cigarette to take in some much-needed nicotine. In the sky above him, black clouds threatened to unleash an almighty storm. Just as the Crime King was about to throw his cigarette butt into the garden against the wire fence, a black ute pulled up outside the workshop. Doug recognised the man who hopped out of the ute straight away. He was the man who'd worked for Tommy Jankowski. Doug strode towards the front gate to meet him. The two tall men shook hands on the footpath. "How are you going?" Lord asked. Nothing happened in the Melbourne crime mob without Douglas George Lord knowing about it. He was an old-school crim who had learned early in life to scam, con, bluff, rather than use force. Although he shot a man dead back in the 90s, it was said that this was in self-defence. If Doug Lord wanted you dead or roughed up, he had someone else do it. A superb strategist, he had combined legitimate business with crime for decades. His friends included politicians, lawyers, meatheads and murderers. The Crime King ushered Farrelly through the front doors and upstairs to his office. The front office staff of Lord Smash Repairs thought it was unusual that Doug should handle a customer off the street personally. They hadn't seen that in years. Before Farrelly could tell his tale of how he got the dent in his Ford, the heavens released a devastating hailstorm. Both men stood silently at the office window and watched as Mother Nature lost her temper. A couple of minutes later, the sun was out, and Farrelly sat down in front of Doug's large desk and told the story of the angry motorbike rider. "The mongrel, eh?" Doug said, shaking his head. "Yeah, so there it is. Reckon you can help me?" "Yeah, no worries, mate, that's nothing. That's easily fixed." The way the handsome grey-haired lord finished his sentence suggested that he had something bigger on his mind. It also seemed that he wanted to talk further, so Farrelly stayed in his seat while Doug took a phone call. After finishing his phone call, Doug asked, "Hey, are you hungry?" "Yeah, I suppose." The two men walked down the road to a takeaway shop located on a corner where they ordered tasty steak sandwiches with the lot. Then they sat down by the window near the entrance and tucked into them. As blokes in dirty overalls wandered in and out of the food shop, Doug tactfully explained his family concerns to Farrelly. The crime king was showing a considerable amount of trust and confidence in Farrelly by telling about his family issues. Farrelly thought that this was strange, but reasoned that it couldn't hurt to listen. Look, Nathan's a good kid. He just needs some good people around him who can give him good advice and support, that's all. That's why I reckon you might be handy. Lord went on to ask Farrelly if he would like to work for him, alongside his youngest son. He wanted him to be his son's mentor, chief strategist, tactician, and number one gun. What makes you so sure I'm the man for the job? If even half the rumours about you are true, Lord paused to look Farrelly in the eye before continuing, well then you're the man to train my boy to take my place. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but isn't that your job, Doug? Lord screwed up his face and stared out the window. A couple of seconds later he answered sadly, he doesn't listen to me. Farrelly had a lot more questions for the senior criminal. Where was he going? What was wrong with other members of the family taking over? And didn't he have someone in his organisation that could do the same job? But he guessed he'd find the answers soon enough, as he agreed to the job. He took the work because of the issues he was still struggling with as a veteran. The amount of money offered was enormous, and then there was this theme of being on a one-way journey with no turn-offs. Also a veteran and on a one-way journey with no turn-offs was Julius Caesar. At the Battle of Pharsalus during the Roman Civil War, Caesar went up against his rival, Pompey. The battle in 48 BC is legendary for two things. First, it was at Pharsalus that Caesar turned the tide of war his way, even though he was outnumbered. And the second reason was Caesar's psychological exploitation of his enemies. The pivotal point in the battle came when Pompey sent his feared cavalry of Roman noblemen into Caesar's right flank. To counter this, Caesar signalled for the fourth line of infantry, whom he had prepared for this moment, to charge into the cavalry. When these forces collided, the infantrymen, with great ferocity, thrust their javelins up into the faces of the vain aristocrats. The noblemen, who were so used to slashing away at infantry from horseback uncontested, fled the field in panic and disarray. Seeing this retreat, the rest of Pompey's army turned and followed the cavalry. Pompey and his army were routed. The victory, and Caesar's rule of Rome, was underpinned by his psychological knowledge of the enemy at Pharsalus, as he knew vanity and the bully boy mentality were the cavalryman's weakness. This battle came to mind when Farrelly drove his ute through the Lord Country's estate front gate, as the timber sign next to the gate read, Pharsalus. The repaired, glistening black ute rolled up the gravel driveway towards the homestead that was perched on top of a hill, shaded by large trees. The driveway circled the hill the house sat on and snaked around to the back of the feature. From the gate, the homestead looked like your classic bush home, with a wide timber veranda all round and a green corrugated iron roof. But as you made your way around the hill, the rest of the home appeared like magic. Half of the hill had been removed to accommodate the 3-storey luxurious Lord mansion. At ground level was a 12-car garage filled with luxury vehicles. The next floor up was devoted to bedrooms, a gym, and a recreation room. Spread out on the top was the eating, living, and entertaining area. Farrelly parked his vehicle on the large paved area laid out before the garage. He got out of his four-wheel drive and stared up at the grand mansion for a second. As he started walking toward the house, someone yelled out at Farrelly from the top deck, "Hey, Jace, take the lift to the top floor." The person who yelled the instructions was Nathan Lord. "Another day, another gangster yelling at me from a balcony," Farrelly said to himself as he walked by a yellow Lamborghini parked in the garage. He took the elevator to the top floor, and when the glass lift doors opened, Doug Lord was standing there ready to greet him. The crime king seemed relaxed as he guided his special guest around the corner to where everybody was hanging out. In a wide room with a veranda and a fantastic view of the surrounding district were a lot of well-dressed gangsters and their partners. As a mighty sun disappeared over the horizon, the guests chatted, mingled, and snacked on delicious food. They drank fine wines and designer beers and lost money playing games of chance as they revelled in the grandness of their lives. All eyes were on Farrelly as he walked through the room and then out onto the veranda. he didn't disappoint their lofty expectations of him. Farrelly had a physical presence that stirred different emotions in different people. The men picked him as dangerous and a threat, while the women felt something primordial stir inside them. However people viewed him, he still caused a visible and audible stir as he passed through the crowd to get to one end of the balcony. Farrelly was not impressed when he got his first up-close look at Nathan Lord. Dressed like a rock star ready to do a photo shoot for Rolling Stone magazine, the youngest Lord boy stood up from a plush outdoor couch and shook Farrelly's hand softly. The blue-eyed boy had blonde hair that came down over his forehead and ears. He was tall and had a cut and tan physique. He was a real dandy and had loads of followers on social media. After Nathan sat back down, his father and Farrelly grabbed seats and sat in front of him. Someone handed Farrelly a vodka, lime and soda, just as Nathan kicked off the conversation. "So you're my new guy, hey? You come with a big reputation, the bad bastard who took out Piggy Turn and the whole fucking Kowalka clan. I think I'm going to call you Rambo from now on." Unlike his father, who felt embarrassed by those opening remarks, Nathan had a reckless mouth, and a man with a reckless mouth is a reckless decision-maker. So from Nathan's opening sentences, Farrelly realised he was in for a major test. From then on, Doug took over the conversation. Thoughtfully, the crime king laid out for Farrelly what they expected from him and how things were run. While this was going on, Nathan sat back and drank down his beer and did vodka shots handed to him by his sycophants. He paid little attention to the discussion. This didn't please Farrelly at all, as he looked back at Nathan every now and then to see what his reaction was to certain things said. "Just do what you're told, Jace, and everything will be sweet." They were the Lord boy's departing words as he got up with a beer in his hand and disappeared into the crowd. Doug watched his son leave, while Farrelly didn't bother. The partly disappointed, partly embarrassed look on Doug's face after his son left told Farrelly everything he wanted to know. "Don't worry, Doug, I'll sort everything out." Farrelly's confident style and statement brought a smile to the crime king's face. Now that they had come to some sort of an agreement, Doug had some advice for Farrelly as he looked around at the people gathered at his home. "These cunts that work for Nathan, don't be scared to show 'em who's boss. Remember, you've got my backing." He winked at Farrelly, then said, "Come on, I'll introduce you to some people." Henry Lord was an average type of bloke and was not cut from the same criminal cloth as his younger brother Doug. This lord had his own large smash repair shop out in the western suburbs, the largest out that way. From what Farrelly had gathered so far, Henry was violently loyal to his brother Doug and had no aspirations for the top job. As soon as they were introduced, Farrelly established a good rapport with Henry, who was shorter than Doug and had a beard. In the middle of some light banter, Henry's eldest son, Cody, appeared by his side. Cody was a killer and a leader. If he hadn't killed yet, he was going to, and hard men would follow him without question. Farrelly recognised these qualities in Cody the instant he locked eyes with the blonde-haired, dark-eyed teenager. By now the sun had disappeared, and had been replaced by darkness and a large bright moon. A nice breeze cooled the house and relaxed its occupants. The next Lord family member Farrelly was introduced to was Doug's eldest son, Dane. He was a large man of average appearance. Also introduced was Dane's frumpy, unattractive wife, who looked like a real handful. Both were very polite and told Farrelly they were looking forward to working with and seeing more of him, and offered their help in any way possible. Even though these two came across as nice and polite, it all seemed to be a big act to Farrelly. He figured that Dane and wife were bright and very ambitious. As far as the smash repair and any other family businesses were concerned, Dane had overseen them for a long time. During the now-ended Underworld War, Dane had shown he could lead men and negotiate deals with some of the most ruthless men and women from all parts of society. Why he wasn't the successor was another question Farrelly still needed answering. As the new member of the criminal clan chatted with some old hands and lesser lights out on the veranda, he kept one eye on Nathan. With a champagne bottle in one hand and a cigar in the other, Nathan bumped and swore his way around the party. As he leant on the huge shoulders of a bodybuilder, he said out loud, "Let's say we go down to that club and give the manager, what's his name?" "Nick," the bodybuilder replied. Yeah, fucking Nick. And, shoot him in the face in front of everyone. After this suggestion, Nathan slid off the bodybuilder onto the floor, laughing as he fell. Certain sections of the party watched on in amusement and egged Nathan on. Others looked on in disgust and dismissed him as a spoiled ingrate. After witnessing the rock star's fall, one of the old hands placed a hand on Farrelly's shoulder, then leaned in and whispered, "You've got a big job ahead of you, mate." Nathan's partner was helping him up from the floor. She was a jewel. A rare jewel that any man would dash and drive would fight and die for. Selena Stewart was from a formerly powerful crime family that was now nothing but ashes. She was educated and intelligent, and had a grace and elegance that, along with her beauty, gave her an aura that could only be counted by a true Hollywood starlet. She picked Nathan up from the floor with the help of a couple of blokes, then talked and walked her partner to a bedroom downstairs. There, Nathan collapsed and passed out on a giant bed. When Selena returned to the party, she laughed off Nathan's antics and made light of them with some polite boys will be boys excuses and a dazzling smile that would calm a cornered lion. The newest crime lieutenant in the Lord clan was noting all of this from a distance. A lot of the guests were now saying their farewells and thanking their host for a pleasurable night. Farrelly was finishing his last drink and having a yarn with Henry Lord when Doug tapped him on the shoulder and asked him to hang around. When Henry departed, Farrelly walked out onto the balcony. As he watched red tail lights disappear into the night as they left the property, Farrelly leaned onto the balcony balustrade, trying not to analyse too much of what he'd taken in so far. He had just dropped himself into a relaxed mode when he felt someone glide in next to him. As Selena offered him her hand, the first thing that struck Farrelly was her wild blue eyes. In those first few seconds of eye contact, both recognised in each other the power to shape the future. "Doug informs me you're coming to work for my Nathan," Selena said in a calm, warm tone. Farrelly was about to answer, but froze as he watched the woman in front of him. With both hands, she grabbed her thick hair, that was as black and shiny as the feathers of a crow and hanging down her back, and placed it gently over her shoulder. "Yeah, I'm always up for a challenge," Farrelly finally replied. They both smiled at Farrelly's diplomatic but cheeky reply. During this exchange, neither took their eyes off each other. As she went to speak again, Selena caressed her hair. "Nathan has his ways, but you'll quickly find he's quite capable." "I'm sure you're right." The silence that followed was anything but awkward. "Shall we head back inside and take a seat? Doug shouldn't be much longer." "Sure, why not?" Back inside, Selena curled up into a comfortable chair on Farrelly's right, while he leaned back in a couch that faced out toward the balcony. The easiest way to get a conversation going is to ask someone about themselves, and this is what Farrelly did. Selena obliged and talked modestly about the string of salons and spas she ran successfully. As the lovely brunette spoke, Farrelly studied her. He quickly came to suspect that underneath all that civility and poise was a shark with razor-sharp teeth. Gracious enough not to talk too much about herself, Selena turned the conversation to Farrelly. With great tact and the use of phrases such as restructured their organisation through a use of various strategies and tactics and permanently relieved them of their responsibilities, Farrelly gave a brief, diluted overview of his last few years. Usually, he'd just answer questions about his past with a bit of this, a bit of that, but for some reason that he couldn't think of at the time, he wanted to impress Selena. "Wow, you've lived an interesting, eventful life," Selena remarked, looking at him intensely. She openly and honestly admired Farrelly's experiences and approach to life. "You're going to make a great addition to the family business," she remarked. A short time later, Doug walked into the living area. Looking a little run down, he fell back into a seat on Farrelly's left. The crime king perked up, though, when Farrelly commented on the naming of the property, saying that Caesar, the Civil War, was a book he had enjoyed reading. After that piece of information was offered up, the three argued and debated for hours over pivotal figures and moments in history. Each person impressed the others with their depth of knowledge and analytical skill. By the time first light arrived, Farrelly realised that the three of them had formed their own clique, where members were either observers, holders, or hungry for power. Before the sun rose, Farrelly said his goodbyes and thanked his hosts for the evening, then headed for his vehicle. As he drove down the driveway, he thought he'd always come under the category of observer of power. But as he glanced back up at the house and saw Selina standing out on the veranda watching him leave, the idea of running a criminal syndicate with a stunning brunette by his side seemed like an outstanding option. Quote from Hunter S. Thompson: "For them, the romance of life is long dead, and they are forced to go through the years on a treadmill, cursing their existence, yet afraid to die because of the unknown which faces them after death." On the Monday after the Lord's party, Farrelly threw every ounce of energy he had into reshaping Nathan Lord's enterprises. The motivation came from two factors. One, he was up for a huge challenge. The second came from the afternoon after the Lord party. Farrelly had visited some of his suburbanite friends who, without understanding what they were doing, propelled him further down the path he was on by isolating and alienating him even further than he already was. These friends, a husband and wife, had known Farrelly for years and still could not come to terms with his march through life. Farrelly was now in his late 30s, and they saw him as a threat to everything they'd been fed and lived by. How and why they existed was in question. The brave daily decisions Farrelly made to ensure his commitment to his personal constitution reminded the couple of their own failures and the insecurities that underpinned them. In fighting back and holding on to theirs and the majority's creeds and codes, they scoffed, rolled their eyes, and gave him patronising life advice as if he was a misguided child. That afternoon, sitting in the couple's dining room, drinking tea and eating chocolate biscuits, Farrelly had had enough. The daily grind of trying to survive as a reasonably free-thinking and acting person finally took its toll. The burning rage that Farrelly had buried down in his belly burst out in an aggressive but controlled speech that shook the small-minded couple to the bone. Individually and psychologically, Farrelly pulled them apart like roasted chickens. The husband copped the worst of the spiel for being a narcissist and the owner of a serious edifice complex. Farrelly was immensely pleased by the shocked expression on the couple's pale faces when he'd finished what he'd been wanting to say for years. After this confrontation, the backing track to Farrelly's next few months became Tupac Shakur's song, Me Against the World. For the first few days in his new role, Farrelly rode around town in a customised blacked-out Range Rover with Nathan Lord silently observing his operations. He met the Lord Boys crew and inspected his places of businesses, such as grow houses, drug labs, gambling dens, stash houses, and strip joints spread out throughout the northern and western suburbs. In these places of business, he came up against indifference and hostility from some of Nathan's men. However, the majority of those he met were friendly and gave him the respect he'd earned and deserved. His reputation had followed him and loomed large. At the end of those few days, Farrelly judged Nathan's criminal operations as sloppy and too high profile. Overall, it was half-assed and unprofessional and had to change. That Nathan got away with not having his operations dismantled by police or attacked and taken over by competing criminal clans was probably due to a lot of luck, not to mention the friends Doug Lord had in government and society. One bright day, Farrelly walked Nathan out of a CBD strip club and sat down on a bench in a park on the Yarra River opposite the casino. "So what do you reckon, Rambo? I run a shit-hot operation, don't I?" "Not bad," Farrelly lied, "but it can be better and bigger, and I know how to do it." If Farrelly wanted to overhaul Nathan's businesses, he knew that the boy would resist with everything he had, because to him it would be an insult. Farrelly was cunning enough to work around this. "Listen, I can make you the most respected and biggest operator in the business, yeah? You do all right, but let me tell you something. So does every other bloke." "Go on," said Nathan, clearly intrigued. If you want to separate yourself from the rest and run the most formidable and feared outfit in Melbourne or Australia, which I presume you want, right? Yeah, fuck yeah. Well, we're going to have to make some slight changes. Nathan nodded in agreement. Now that he'd been given the green light, Farrelly went through a list he'd drawn up of bright and willing young men in Nathan's network. He proposed sending these men on courses in South Africa, South America and the USA. There, they would have training in weapons, unarmed combat and first aid. They would also learn surveillance and counter-surveillance, vehicle handling and anti-ambush drills with vehicles. But what was also beneficial was the professional, almost military mindset that they would get into during the course and hopefully bring back with them. All the young men he selected had never been out of the suburbs before, so the overseas travel would do them some good. It would broaden their horizons. Next, with the help of a local car dealership that did business with the Lords, all flashy cars used for business were replaced by generic vehicles. Then, the blokes who were not selected for the overseas courses were taken to the Lord's other property further north in the state. There, in a secluded valley in the shadows of Mount Buller, the city boys froze and moaned in the frosty mornings as they went through proper weapon handling with Farrelly. But the whinging stopped once the young men got into live-fire building and room entry drills inside abandoned homes and sheds. On these weekend courses, Farrelly had a mate turn up and teach IED and surveillance device detecting techniques for vehicles and buildings. Then there were lessons on tight signal security and building and transportation protection. The weak, lame and insipid were weeded out. In came new blood with smarts, guts and get up and go. However, not everyone was on board with the changes taking place. Nathan Lord's chief of operations was Rocky D'Angelo. From the get-go, this junior crime boss took exception to Farrelly's presence in the crime network, and when the new guy started changing things up, D'Angelo complained loudly and incessantly to Nathan. Happy with the evolution of his business, the Lord boy told Rocky to cool his jets and do as he was instructed by Farrelly. But the loss of prestige was too much for D'Angelo, so he started to poison and undermine the criminal culture that Farrelly was trying to establish. This scenario had come to a conclusion at a bland tavern that sat fat on a corner in a northern suburb. The tavern consisted of a bottle shop, pokies room and sports bar, just like any other. Casually dressed, Farrelly walked toward the tavern's front glass doors. He noticed Rocky's red Holden V8 coupe parked out the front in a disabled spot on the right. Once he was inside, Farrelly turned left into the sports bar, where he'd been informed D'Angelo was having a drink and a punt. On this Saturday afternoon, there were few people in the bar, and most of them were standing under monitors displaying race results in the back left-hand corner. Sitting around a tall round table by the front windows were two hoods who worked for the Lords. Farrelly walked straight up to them. "Where is he?" asked Farrelly. He was calm but ready to go. One of the men, who was covered in tattoos, pointed towards the toilets in the back right-hand corner. As Farrelly waited in a corner facing out toward the toilets, he noticed that most of the men in the bar were old-school blokes, some of which were familiar to his family, so he knew that whatever went down next would most likely never leave the pub. Rocky came out of the toilet strutting like a peacock with all its plumage on display. He wore a tracksuit top and tight denim jeans, and multiple gold chains were hanging around his neck. As he tucked himself in, D'Angelo looked over to the table where his associates were seated. He then looked to the right. When he spotted Farrelly, his posture changed to that of a man unsure of himself and his place in the world. His chest and shoulders deflated, and his strides became shorter. Farrelly moved out of the corner and stood by the table occupied by the two gangsters. "G'day, Jace. Come for a punt, have ya?" "No, I want to have a word with you." "What about, bro?" D'Angelo replied, acting surprised. His play acting almost made Farrelly laugh. "I've been told by good sources that you've been going around town telling everyone I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm full of shit, and you're going to do me in." After Farrelly made this accusation, Rocky stared at his two mates sitting at the table. One of them looked out the window and the other stared at the glass of beer in his hand. "Nah, bro, I've got no problem with ya," D'Angelo said, throwing his arms out wide. "No problem here, bro." Most of the people in the bar sensed something was about to go down, so they either turned away or went to the toilet. "Don't fuck with me, Rocky." Farrelly moved around the table and stood in front of the junior boss. Rocky took a step back, looking at his mates who hadn't moved. "I'm running the fucking show now, understand?" As he said this, Farrelly closed the gap between the two. "Sweet, no worries. And this bullshit showboating you're doing around town, that's over as well. Got it?" Rocky had a bad habit of going into nightclubs with his mates chemically fueled, with wads of cash in his hand and pistols tucked into the front of his designer pants. Then, when he felt he hadn't had enough attention, he would raise his shirt to reveal his weapons, while telling everybody who he was. "We don't need the heat that shit brings, do you understand?" D'Angelo's tone and attitude became cockier. "Oh, I'm hearing you, bro. Loud and fucking clear." That was enough for Farrelly. He delivered a short, crisp headbutt to the bridge of Rocky's nose. "Fuck me! You fucking cunt! You're fucked now, cunt!" screamed the gangster, holding his hand over his twisted nose that had blood pouring out of it. Those words angered Farrelly even more. With great speed, he pulled the pistol from its holster high on his right hip under his jacket, and with tremendous power, hit Rocky over the head with it. The skull-crunching strike sent the junior crime boss falling unconscious to the ground. With the help of the other two gangsters, Farrelly carried the blood-covered D'Angelo out to his red vehicle and threw him in the boot. A couple of weeks later, the news media reported the disappearance of gangland boss Rocco Antonio D'Angelo. Apparently, the criminal was last seen at a suburban tavern and had not been seen since. People were asked to come forward with any information regarding the whereabouts of Mr. D'Angelo. Nobody did. To make things worse for police investigators, camera footage from the hotel had been accidentally erased. Rocky D'Angelo was never seen or heard of again. But he wasn't the only one who was relieved of his duties and given a retirement package on their exit from Nathan Lord's criminal organisation. Two other showboaters who didn't agree with the new improved professional criminal network suffered similar fates. Along with personnel changes, there was also a shift in intelligence flow. Within a short amount of time, little to no information about this network went out to those not involved in the network's operations. Even those within the organisation only knew their position and role within the network and nothing more. Social media boasting was also dropped to zero. Open source intelligence gathering on the network was no longer an option. On the other side of the coin, a lot of intelligence on criminal groups and the machinations of the authorities came in. The network received fresh and sound intelligence on an hourly basis. This was because plenty of money and other pleasurable incentives were splashed around town to the right people. Routine was avoided. Criminal operations and operators never kept a regular, predictable schedule. After a short while, Nathan Lord's well-known and talked about criminal empire faded into the noise and commotion of the big city. As blokes came back from their overseas courses, they were immediately put into important leadership positions. New cash-producing cells were born, along with new businesses such as firearms procurement and sales. Not only did Farrelly think this arms racket would be a good earner, he also suspected it would be a good chance for him to get out of Melbourne and catch up with some old army buddies. He was correct on both counts, and his visits to Townsville became a highlight for him. At first, Farrelly reported back to Nathan on a regular basis, but after a few weeks he didn't bother. The rockstar gangster took great delight in knowing everything would be done for him, because he got to kick back and party. So, while this revolution of Nathan Lord's criminal organisation took place, Nathan himself drank and did as many drugs and women as possible. However, there was someone whom Farrelly consulted and sometimes took orders from. That was Selena. The busy beauty salon inside a western suburb shopping centre was Selena's headquarters and home away from home. Inside the back office of this shop, Farrelly and Selena met twice a week, sometimes more. 3.5 months had flown by since Farrelly had started work with the Lord family, and the Nathan Lord branch of the Lord Crime Empire was now pumping out more profit for its size than anything else in the country. So, when Farrelly met up with Selina and they sat down together in her office facing each other, she was ecstatic, having just visited Doug Lord. "Oh, he's so impressed with what you've done. He's already talking about you reshaping the rest of the business." "Let's just stick to one thing at a time," Farrelly replied. Farrelly had no intention of taking on more local work at this stage. As Selina ate her salad, Farrelly studied her clear, unblemished skin and her healthy dark hair and realised how much he enjoyed being in her presence. "So how did things go up north this time? Did you get what we discussed?" Selina asked him between mouthfuls of salad. "Sure did. The shipment should be here in a couple of days, and there are buyers lining up already." "Excellent." After finishing another mouthful of her food, Selina leaned forward and placed her hand on Farrelly's. "Can I discuss something delicate with you?" "Sure." "It's family related." Farrelly cringed when he heard that sentence. According to Selina, although one sector of the Lord Empire was flying, another wasn't. The Western Suburbs branch had hit a major iceberg. It seemed Doug's older brother Henry had an informant in his workshop, and Henry had been caught on a recording device discussing illegal activities. He now had a long stint in prison hanging over his head. Already aware of this, Farrelly wondered where Selina was going as she repeated the story. "But that's not the only problem," she said quietly before continuing. "I'm pretty sure Doug is not aware of this, but Henry plans on taking control of all facets of the family business soon, placing his son Cody in charge, when he does his time in prison and Doug retires up on the Gold Coast." The news of Doug's retirement was a bit of a shock for Farrelly, although he thought there was some credence to the statement about Henry trying to grab the business for his son. He knew Henry didn't have what it takes to run such a big organisation, plus he would be in prison soon, and Nathan was hopeless. Cody, on the other hand, appeared potentially quite capable of running the criminal side of the Lord Empire. So the story made sense, sort of, but there was still Doug's eldest son Dane still in the picture. "This is between us, okay?" Selina said as she gripped Farrelly's hand. "I've discussed this with Nathan, and we think it's best if Henry is, as you say, relieved of his duties within the family business." Farrelly stared into Selina's eyes as he considered the suggested assassination. "Okay, what you're asking is very complicated, but it can be done, as long as this stays between you, me and Nathan." "You have my assurance that it will," replied Selina. Looking relieved, Selina got up out of her chair, bent at the waist and placed a soft kiss on Farrelly's cheek. Before sitting back down, she whispered in his ear, "I have complete faith and trust in you." Trust and faith were strong words. That's what Farrelly was thinking as he sat at a table outside a bakery that was one of many small shops nestled around a Kmart store. Sitting next to him, soaking in the sun and truck fumes drifting in from a main road, was Selina. 20 minutes past the specified meeting time, Nathan turned up in his Range Rover with 2 bodyguards. After dropping off the Lord boy, the minders parked the black vehicle in the car park, not far from the bakery. Nathan wandered over to the bakery in his own time, looking strung out and ready to pass out. When he sat down, he placed his forehead on the table. "Listen in, Nathan. This is what you're going to do." When he heard Farrelly was giving him an order, Nathan sat upright in his chair, then glanced over at Selina, who stared at him fiercely. Nathan slumped back in his seat and listened. "This Saturday night you have a poker game late at night at your house, right? And you invite Henry over." Nathan listened intently for the next couple of minutes as Farrelly explained his plan. There was now an understanding between the Lord boy and the manager of his criminal affairs about who was in charge. That Saturday night, a grey Toyota sedan turned left off the Hume Highway into a brand new industrial park. The sedan cruised along a freshly laid asphalt road, lined with factories that had large windowed offices. The factories were yet to be occupied, and lit by orange streetlights, the industrial zone had an eerie look and feel about it, like a science fiction ghost town. The grey sedan drove through this area and went through a roundabout. Beyond the roundabout were paddocks, some of which were fenced off ready for construction or auction. At the end of the cul-de-sac, the Toyota pulled up and parked. "Where are you going?" Nathan nervously asked as Farrelly opened the sedan's driver door. "Stretch my legs." As he watched Farrelly walk out into the paddock and start stretching, the boy took a swig of whiskey from the silver flask he had hidden in the pocket of his jacket. Nathan couldn't believe how relaxed his driver was. He wondered how many times Farrelly had done this before. "Fucking psycho," he muttered to himself. Farrelly was standing near a dirty mattress and some dumped rubbish, feeling a nice breeze brush against the back of his neck. As he stared back down the road, he tried to anticipate how the rockstar would react when the time came for the execution. The only way to lure Henry Lord out by himself to an isolated spot like this was with the help of someone he thought he could trust. This was where Nathan had to step up. The boy had phoned Henry a couple of days ago, inviting him to a poker game at one of his apartments. Henry accepted the invitation. Earlier that day, Nathan re-rang his uncle and asked him to a meeting before the game, out at a new industrial estate, to help negotiate with some Sydney crims Henry had dealt with previously. If everything went to plan, the boy would be back at his apartment before everybody arrived for the poker game. If anybody asked, he'd been there all night, and Selena would verify this. Headlights appeared up the road. As a black BMW sedan drove through the roundabout, Farrelly walked over to the Toyota and tapped on the driver's window. As he waited for the BMW to park near them, Farrelly took a tighter grip on the pistol he had in the front pouch of the dark hooded jacket he was wearing. Nathan got out of the vehicle and shut the door. He gave Farrelly a tense look and adjusted the pistol tucked in the front of his tight black jeans. After the BMW had pulled up and parked next to the grey sedan, the driver's window on the black car rolled down slowly. Before the window had dropped right down, Henry asked from behind the wheel, "So where are these Sydney cunts?" "They should be here any minute," the Lord boy replied, before heading around the back of the BMW to get in the front passenger seat. Farrelly jumped in the back seat behind Henry. "I told you not to deal with these Sydney fuckers." Yeah, I know." The wavering Nathan's voice told Farrelly that the boy was having second thoughts. He was about to freak out and most likely do something silly, such as run, or worse, turn on Farrelly. Uncle Henry now sensed something wasn't right. "What the fuck's going on, Nathan?" 2 9mm rounds punched through the back of Henry's skull. Blood and brain thickly splattered the cracked front windscreen. As his uncle sat with his chin on his chest, blood pouring down his front, Nathan stared at him in horror. "Grab his phone out of his pocket," Farrelly instructed from the back seat. The Lord boy continued to stare. Farrelly slid along the back seat and slapped Nathan hard across the head with the pistol. "What are you doing, you crazy cunt?" Nathan screamed, holding the side of his head. "Grab his phone." With a disgusted expression on his face, the Lord boy searched his uncle's pockets for the phone that could be used as evidence. Over the next couple of days, while hysteria took hold over the murder of Henry Alexander Lord, disinformation was spread around the underworld. The circulating rumours said that the execution of Henry was carried out by crooks from Sydney, the result of a large deal gone wrong. Quote from George Bernard Shaw: "Youth is a wonderful thing. What a crime to waste it on children." Whether young Cody believed the gossip about his father was irrelevant to Farrelly. He knew Cody would come after him anyway. The 19-year-old had eyes on the Lord throne, and he understood that if he wanted to take out Nathan, he had to take out his highly capable advisor. But this was a hard task. Farrelly was feared. No one in the underworld knew where he lived. He didn't socialise with criminals, and the only contact he had with his colleagues was during times of business. Farrelly would meet up with his colleagues at pre-designated locations. When business was completed, he would disappear like the shadow of a ghost in the darkest of nights. So Cody was up against it if he wanted to get his man. But with youth comes confidence and tenacity. Aware of this, Farrelly wrapped up a meeting with a few team leaders at a pool hall on Sydney Road and decided to head home. Although he was only 25 minutes drive from his house, it would take him double that time to get there, or more, factoring in some counter-surveillance moves. Some days, along the 4-lane ring road, Farrelly would slow right down well below the speed limit in the left lane. If you wanted to follow, you had to slow down with him, thus exposing yourself. There were cleansing zones in shopping centre car parks where he cruised around for the same reason. Plus, car parks have multiple exits for fast getaways. Service stations on busy intersection corners enabled him to bypass traffic lights. Again, if someone was following him. It took a brave man to stalk Farrelly, but that's what somebody was doing in a silver Audi coupe this night when he left the pool hall. Deciding not to catch out whoever was following him, Farrelly drove straight up Sydney Road. After going through a few sets of traffic lights, Farrelly pulled his new green Toyota 4-wheel drive wagon off a highway into a neighbourhood with a creek running through it. The quiet street where Farrelly parked his vehicle was a dead end. The men in the Audi didn't know that. The silver Audi parked and turned off its lights, 40 metres back from the target. Cody, who sat in the passenger seat, watched as Farrelly got out of his vehicle. Under a bright street light, Farrelly locked the Toyota wagon before strolling off down the middle of the road. "Stay here," Cody told his driver as he got out of the Audi. As Cody stepped it out to keep pace with his quarry, he took out the .357 Magnum revolver he had tucked into the back of his jeans. The inexperienced youth was unsure whether Farrelly knew he was being followed, or he did this walk as routine. What he did know, however, was that his prey was running out of road. Cody could see houses sitting across the end of the street. With the .357 in both hands, ready for a gunfight, Cody asked himself if he wanted to go through with this or not. By the time he'd answered this question, his quarry had disappeared. Concealed in the dark between the N2 houses in the street was a laneway. Cautiously, the kid stepped into the alleyway, imagining all sorts of sinister scenarios were waiting for him. He walked through the laneway without trouble. With his eyes adjusted to the darkness, Cody stepped out of the alley into a wide creek line. The concrete path that twisted in and out of the creek had just been put down. Under a half moon, the white path was lit up like the yellow brick road from The Wizard of Oz. As the kid sucked in a deep breath, then exhaled, he looked to his left along the footpath. Up ahead he recognised Farrelly's silhouette disappearing again, but this time into some thick scrub. Cody followed. Where the footpath entered the close brush, Cody stopped. The tension was becoming too much for the young man. He was just about to turn back when he heard Farrelly's voice shatter the silent night many metres up ahead. "Look out, cunt!" After the warning, the kid heard some mumbling, then it went quiet again. Knowing his prey was further on, Cody had the confidence to enter the cavern-like scrub, this time with the revolver up in a firing position. The path climbed for a while, then re-entered open space. As he was about to exit the scrub, Cody observed someone walking towards him. A bald man's scalp shone in the moonlight as he drew closer to the kid. As the man staggered from side to side down the path, Cody took up a position in the brush just off the track. He was certain that this was a Farrelly trick. The bald bloke was close and closing. The kid's finger put more pressure on the trigger. He was about to fire, but at point-blank range, Cody smelt the stench of alcohol on the approaching man's breath. Harmlessly, the drunk mumbled and staggered past him and didn't even notice that he was there. Cody placed his hands on his knees and sucked in a few deep breaths to try and bring his heart rate back down. He looked ahead to where the path crossed over the creek and swung left along some back fences. His quarry was nowhere to be seen. Now more relaxed, Cody decided to keep walking along the path to see what he could find. He was certain Farrelly was long gone, though. The white path twisted around and went back over the creek, then climbed till it came to more thick scrub. With the .357 Magnum revolver down the front of his jeans, Cody entered the scrub with confidence he didn't have before, because up ahead he knew there was a main thoroughfare. He could hear the odd car pass over a bridge, and orange streetlights were now illuminating the creek line. The kid's heart missed a beat when he caught sight of the road. Farrelly was standing on the curb, looking up the road towards oncoming traffic. As he slipped into the shadows, Cody watched his prey jog across the first road, then stop on the medium strip. After waiting a few seconds for a vehicle to pass, Farrelly jogged across the second road and back onto the path and into a black creek line. The kid tracked his quarry with renewed nerve. While he was on the medium strip, Cody heard the distinctive noise of an aluminium can being kicked across concrete. The sound came from the creek line up ahead. As he left the thoroughfare and stepped back into darkness, the kid decided to leave the revolver in his jeans. 20 metres on, he spotted the soft drink can sitting in low light on the path just ahead. To the right, just off the footpath, was a giant grey tree stump with thick dead branches sticking out of it. The kid was concentrating on the can when suddenly the tree trunk came alive and came straight at him. Cody straightened up and turned in fright. Farrelly hip and shouldered the teenager to the ground, driving all the wind out of him. As Cody lay on his back paralysed, Farrelly placed a knee on his chest and a hand over his face. With his spare hand, Farrelly removed the .357 Magnum from the kid's pants. "Pretty big piece of artillery for a young bloke," Farrelly remarked as he held the revolver up into the moonlight to inspect it. The kid tried to struggle as he started to breathe again. Farrelly placed the muzzle of the revolver under Cody's chin. "Don't struggle, young fella, or I'll fertilise the grass with your brains." Instinctively knowing that he wasn't going to be killed at that moment, Cody stayed still as Farrelly got to his feet. As the kid moved to get up, Farrelly pushed him back down with a shove to the chest with his foot. "You've got some balls, Cody, I'll give you that. No brains, but plenty of balls. Are you going to do me in?" "I might. But I have a question for you first," Farrelly stated calmly. "What's that?" "Why would you want to kill the man that can give you everything you want?" "And what do I want?" "The entire Lord Empire and all the money and power that goes with it." Quote from George Bernard Shaw: "Beware of the man whose God is in the skies." Father Michael Fairclough was a good man. Too good, in fact, and that's why he had to die. The priest had been an aggressive campaigner against organised crime and corruption for years. At 58 years of age, the bespectacled man with a paunch was in his prime. He had a large congregation that gathered regularly to hear him speak on the evil of illegal narcotics and the sin, misery and death that it brings. He preached the same message in his regular spots on television and radio. He challenged leaders to tackle the gangland kings head on and say no to their money. But it wasn't the public pressure that the man of God could turn up at any time that had him in danger. Recently, someone anonymous had handed the father some digital documentation that provided solid evidence of criminal wrongdoing by a lot of big societal players. It was more than enough evidence to flip the state on its head. This is why power brokers with a lot to hide wanted him dead. It was an overcast, blustery day. Old Pentridge Prison, with its bluestone outer walls and medieval castle front entrance, still looked as scary and foreboding as the day it opened in the 1800s. Next to the disused prison was the large red brick St. Paul's Church. Father Fairclough sat peacefully on a wooden bench on the green lawn between St. Paul's and his residence. He was wearing a long-sleeved, ankle-length black cassock with clerical collar. As he read his book, a man with a mission walked off the street and made a beeline toward the priest. "G'day, Father. No media commitments today?" Farrelly politely inquired as he sat down on the bench next to Fairclough. No, not today." The priest took a sip of the tea sitting between him and the mysterious man, whom he judged had something to say or ask. The priest took a sip of the tea sitting between him and the mysterious man, whom he judged had something to say or ask. "Not the best weather to be sitting outside, Father." "I enjoy the fresh air." "Hazardous chemical fumes more like it." Both men smiled. "Can I help you with something, young man?" No, but I think I can help you." "Oh, how is that?" "Well, Father." Words usually flowed easily for Farrelly, but suddenly they couldn't find their way out of his mouth. When it came to telling rough men they were heading for a trip to the hospital or morgue, he just came straight out with it, and with attitude too. But as he sat there with the priest, a man who only wanted what was right for the community, it seemed to Farrelly that he was about to cross a line that shouldn't be crossed. Plus, there was this funny thing of being intimidated by the priest. Even though Farrelly thought organised religion was a nonsense and used by tyrants to control the masses, he was still worried that maybe Fairclough could summon the wrath of God onto him. "Well, Father," Farrelly started again, "as you know, there are a lot of people around town who, let's say, don't live by the same moral codes as your good self." "I see. Go on." "Well, these people are fully aware of the information that you have in your possession. And they've sent you to ask me not to make this information public, correct?" "They have, yes," Farrelly replied, relieved that the priest understood what was going on and was making it easier for him. "Would I perhaps be in any physical danger if I decide to air this dirty laundry?" inquired Fairclough. Unable to look the priest in the eye, Farrelly answered with menace, "It's not for me to say, Father, but a lot of powerful men have a lot to lose, and these men wouldn't think twice about taking someone out to save their own backsides, even if it was a man of the cloth." "Well, go back to your friends and tell them that threats will not deter me. I intend to do what I must to ensure a better future for the people in this city." With that, Farrelly got up and walked away. As Father Fairclough watched the sinister messenger walk off, he was fuming. But later in the night when he was lying in bed, he felt extremely vulnerable and could feel and hear a clock ticking. A couple of days later, Farrelly was summoned to a late-night meeting at Doug Lord's workshop. When Farrelly entered the boardroom at the workshop, 8 men were standing around a long oval table. 7 were crime kings from all over town. There were 3 familiar faces in the room. One was Doug Lord. The other 2 were Tommy Jankowski and Devlin Davies. "How are you, bro?" "Good, Tommy. What about you?" "Looks like we have a problem," Jankowski stated before taking a seat at the table. Devlin Davies walked up to Farrelly with his hand out. As the 2 shook hands and looked each other in the eye, they silently agreed on a temporary peace. "Good to see you, Jace." "Yeah, you too, Dev." "You'll have to come by the house one day and say hello. Your sister's keen to see you." "Yeah, I might have to do that." The last bloke at the meeting appeared out of place and was from either the business or political world. Everybody sat down at the table. Farrelly sat at one end. Doug was chairing the conference, and he asked Farrelly the first question. "So fucking Fairclough reckons he's going to get a Royal Commission up, does he?" "I don't know about a Royal Commission, but he seemed pretty determined to expose what's going on." Tension built in the room for a few minutes as ideas, opinions, and vigorous discussions were aired and took place around the table. Finally, Doug said, "Well, there's not much else to discuss. We all agree then." Everybody at the table nodded their heads, and Doug continued. "The easiest way to solve this problem is for Fairclough to go on holiday. Do you understand, Jason?" "Yeah, I do. I presume you're asking me if I can arrange this holiday." Jankowski jumped in. "We've pulled $1 million together for this holiday, and you've got first option on being the travel agent." Farrelly looked around the table at some grim faces as he considered the offer. Devlin Davies broke the silence. "You know you're the only man for the job." "Sure, why not? I'll do it." "How long have I got?" "A month, max," Doug said. It was a tight time frame, but Farrelly would work day and night to fulfill his end of the agreement. "And how do you plan to do this?" the odd man out asked the contracted killer. "Easy. All I have to do is find me a patsy." A couple of weeks after the boardroom meeting, it was a windy grey day, and Father Fairclough was chatting with some of his flock at the front of St. Paul's Church. The elderly Italian women, dressed in all black, were talking to their priest as they waited for their rides to arrive. As they waited, an old rusted-out cream Mazda sedan drove in and parked in the car park beside the church. A hooded man in dark clothing and sunglasses got out of the Mazda and didn't bother to lock it. He walked around to the front of St. Paul's with his hands stuffed into the front pockets of his jacket. The happy group on the footpath spotted the man approaching. They stopped chatting and watched him walk up to the priest. "You Fairclough?" the hooded man asked angrily. "Yes," the priest answered, holding the Bible to his chest with both hands. "You fucking dirty cunt!" As he shouted the insult for all to hear, the hooded man produced a revolver from the front pouch of his jacket. From centimetres away, he fired 4 rounds into Fairclough's chest. As the old woman screamed and fled, Fairclough fell backward. The assassin stood over the prone priest and pumped 2 rounds into his head. The hooded man sprinted back to his vehicle, started it, and drove out of the car park at great speed. The sedan sped up a main road heading north. After clearing the northern suburbs, the Mazda was in open country and flying up the Hume Highway. About half hour later, it turned off the highway, heading towards quiet Kilmore East. Just past Kilmore East train station, it slowed while going around a bend. On the elbow of the bend, the Mazda did a sharp right-hand turn onto a gravel road. After cruising down the gravel road for a few minutes, the getaway vehicle turned into the driveway of a small property. This piece of land was well wooded and had a caravan plonked in the centre of it. After parking the Mazda so it could be seen from the road, the hooded man hopped out of the vehicle, stepped up into the van and slammed the door closed behind him. A few minutes passed then. Crack! A gunshot from inside the caravan disturbed the peace. A mob of kangaroos feeding nearby took off into the hills at the sound of the shot. As heavy rain started to fall, a man in dark clothing exited the van and walked towards the back of the property. There, hidden by scrub and camouflage netting, was a green Toyota 4-wheel drive wagon. The man uncovered the wagon and drove off the property and faded into the countryside like a bushranger of old. The next day, Senior Policeman Simon Goodbridge held a press conference live from police headquarters. He announced that Father Fairclough's killer, Darren Wayne Anderson Smith, had been found north of the city on a property near Kilmore. He was found dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. The weapon he used to end his life was the same weapon used to shoot the high-profile priest. What was his motive for shooting the priest? A journo asked. It seems Mr. Anderson Smith's partner had been receiving counselling from Father Fairclough over the last couple of weeks, so it may have something to do with that, but we're not entirely sure at this stage, as the investigation is still ongoing. The media scrum smelt blood. Was Father Fairclough having a physical relationship with this woman? It's hard to say at this stage, replied Goodbridge. Trying to guide the conference in another direction, Goodbridge added, "It should be noted that Mr. Anderson Smith had a long history dating back to his early teens of drug and alcohol and mental health issues. He also had been convicted and incarcerated for violent crimes in the past." "What has Mr. Anderson Smith's partner told you so far?" another journalist yelled from the pack. "At this time, we are unable to locate the woman in question." "What do you think has happened to this woman?" The top cop was under the pump as the press scrum became suspicious and wanted to feed on something juicy. "Could the killer be part of a much larger plot to murder the priest? Didn't Father Fairclough receive a number of death threats recently due to his anti-drugs and corruption campaign?" a female reporter inquired. "He did, and at the moment we are following up all leads. Thank you for your time." An uncomfortable Goodbridge left the conference quickly. Over the following days, Fairclough's murder was a hot topic on television, talkback radio, social media, and everywhere else in the country. The Victorian State Premier was attacked by the public and media for not doing enough to combat crime and corruption, and not immediately initiating an inquiry into the murder. His response on the steps of Parliament House was, "I will make no decision on any further inquiries involving the murder of Father Fairclough until Victoria Police has finished its current investigation. Thank you." The day after that, the nation moved on to be outraged about something else. Outrage was not far from the surface of the latest Lord family get-together at Doug's country mansion. The function was packed tight with tension. Unsaid accusations, threats and promises of bloodletting hung around the party like invisible gatecrashers that nobody had the guts to confront. Forever in denial, Doug's wife Edith laughed and chatted out loud. Kids, shopping and weddings dominated conversations as the family ate out on the veranda at a big table. As everybody else concentrated on the great food and wine and admired the beautiful sunset, Cody and Nathan eyed each other over their drinks. Neither touched what was on their plates. Selena was hanging off Nathan's arm. She held and stroked her partner's arm and whispered reassuring words in his ear to support her boy during this crucial contest. However, her efforts were all in vain. Nathan, the first to break, got up from the table and stormed off. Selena pursued him. Edith pleaded with Nathan to come back, and when he disappeared, she made excuses for him. "Oh, he's such a grumble bum, just like his dad. Isn't that right, Doug?" "Yeah," Doug agreed, thinking that retirement on the Gold Coast couldn't come quick enough. "He's just a boy. They all go through this stage, don't they, Doug?" "Yeah." Meanwhile, the kid Cody smiled with the satisfaction of knowing he had the mental edge over his older cousin. On his way to a bedroom downstairs, Nathan raided his father's liquor cabinet and took a bottle of bourbon with him for comfort. The rest of the lords on the veranda finished their meals as if nothing was going on. Everyone stayed for dessert, but not long after that, the lords started quietly trickling off home. In the end, the only ones left in the mansion other than Doug and Edith were the eldest son Dane and his wife, and Nathan and Selena downstairs. Stress, anxiety and paranoia had been eating away at Doug for years. The recent murder of his brother Henry and the dilemma and drama of handing over the Lord Empire almost had him beat. He had none of his signature drive and energy lately. So as he sat back on his couch in the living room with a glass of whiskey in his hand, the last thing he wanted was Dane in his ear. "We have to talk, Dad," Dane said, sitting opposite his father and determined. "Not now, Dane." "Yes, Dad, now. This can't hold off any more. I'm ready to take over. I'm the one that should be in charge, and everybody knows it except you." Doug took a sip of whiskey and said nothing. "Dad, the business will be in good hands. You know I have the experience and what it takes to run it. Just give me the nod." "I haven't made a decision yet." Without invitation, Edith and Dane's wife jumped in with their support for the eldest son running the empire. Doug reacted with anger. "Shut up, you two. You have no say in this." He stormed out onto the veranda. Moments later, his eldest son followed him. "Nathan's a wreck. He's no good, Dad. You can't put him in charge." Before Dane could continue, his father said, "Don't talk about your brother like that." "Look, Dad," Dane said in a gentler tone, "I know he's your favourite and he always has been. I have no idea why, and it pissed me off for years. But I'm over it now. I just want what's right for everyone. I've worked hard for this. I deserve this." The eldest son was dead on with his words. Thinking that he'd gotten through to his father and had done a good job of stating his case, Dane left Doug on the terrace by himself. Back in the living room, Dane and his wife kept working on Edith, pleading their cause. Out on the terrace, Doug concluded that his younger son needed to show what he was made of if he wanted to be boss of bosses. So he headed downstairs in the lift to the bedroom where his boy was attempting to drown himself in grog. Doug banged on the bedroom door where Nathan was holed up. After a few seconds, Selena opened the door just enough for her to see who was there. "Let me in, girlie," demanded Doug. Inside the large bedroom, Doug looked at his pitiful son, who was spread-eagled on the luxurious bed, a glass in one hand and a bottle in the other. "Fucking get up, boy." "Go away." "What the fuck is your problem, Nathan?" Predictably, there was no answer. Like everybody else, the rock star wasn't one for confronting his issues. "Your brother Dane has just asked me to hand over the family business to him, and at this stage, I most probably will, unless you can stand up and tell me why you should be the one to take over." Nathan shot up off the bed and faced his father. He screamed with venom, "I don't want your fucking shit business." "Well, what do you want then?" "I just want to be left alone." "Drink yourself to death, is that what you want?" Unsteadily, The boy turned his back to Doug and drank from the glass. Selina, who had backed into a corner, spoke next. He does want to run the company, Doug. He does, badly. Well, why doesn't he say or do something about it? He just lacks the confidence, that's all, stated Selina, taking up her usual position as Nathan's spokesperson. Feeling even more humiliated and useless because his partner had to speak for him, Nathan threw his glass against the wall. The nearly empty bottle followed. "Leave me the fuck alone," shouted the boy as he brushed by his father and partner on his way out of the bedroom. Selina pursued Nathan as he took the stairs down to the garage. He stepped into the open garage and made his way to his black Porsche, but before he could get in the sports car, Doug and Selina ran in and physically restrained him. "No, Nathan, you're not getting in that car and driving," shouted Selina. "Fucking let me go." After a struggle, the boy pushed both of them away and staggered out of the garage onto the large paved area outside. "Leave me alone, you fucking freaks." Nathan stood in the middle of the paved area and yelled upstairs, "Hey, Mum, throw me down a bottle of something strong, will ya?" "Come back upstairs, Nathan, please. Stop being silly," Edith begged. "Fucking throw me a bottle, for fuck's sake." Seconds later, an unopened bottle of bourbon flew from the top balcony into the welcoming arms of the thirsty alcohol junkie. Nathan unscrewed the cap and gulped down so much needed medicine. Doug and Selina watched all this from the garage. As he walked out of the garage, the shattered father asked his distraught son, "What's wrong with you, Nathan?" Nathan turned away and stumbled off down the driveway, sipping on the bottle that could send him into oblivion. "I care for you, son. I just want to see you happy, that's all." "Happy? You're off your fucking head," Nathan shouted at the top of his voice as he kept walking down the driveway. Happy wasn't something Nathan had known since he was 18. At that age, one night he and some mates were chemically enhanced and cruising around town in a custom white Range Rover full of illegal drugs and weapons when they were stopped by police. When they got to the police station, it didn't take long or much pressure for Nathan to turn on his mates and make statements against them. He was frightened, and not even the knowledge that his father would get him out of this predicament stopped the boy from singing a traitorous tune. He walked free and continued to indulge in Lord Empire largesse, while his friends did serious time in prison. One friend was killed in prison. The others either ended up dead through drug addiction, violence, or by their own hand. Many in the underworld suspected Nathan informed and cut a deal at the expense of his friends, but held their tongues due to his father's power. As for Nathan, from then on, guilt, shame, grief, and the knowledge that he was a coward slowly ate away at his soul. Tick-tock. Another clock was ticking. "Time is running out," Selina stated, as Farrelly sat down in her office. "We need to act fast, Jason. Time is running out. Doug is about to hand over everything to Dane, and Nathan will be shut out for good." As he sat in Selina's office, Farrelly thought over her statement. She sat back waiting for a typical Jason Farrelly solution. What she was asking Farrelly to do now, and had been asking all along, was for him to take out Dane and whoever else was in the way of her plan to ascend to the Lord family throne with Nathan. She had no love for him and could control him easily, though Selina was too clever to come out and announce her real intentions. Both knew from the get-go of their business partnership what the real unsaid deal was. "I'll be in Townsville for a few days next week. That's when your family problems will be fixed," said Farrelly. "How?" "Just leave it to me. I'll get it done." Quote from the Holy Bible, Genesis 4:9. "And the Lord say unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper?" In the peaceful surgery of a Townsville sports injury clinic, Farrelly grimaced as a doctor inspected the gunshot wound on his hip. "It's pretty clean, took a bit of bone, but you were lucky," the surgeon said. "Good. Patch him up quickly, then we'll get out of here," ordered Camden. "No, not here. You've attracted too much attention already. Plus I have other patients to attend to." "Listen, dickhead, if you think that drug problem you have is a worry, wait till I start on you. Sammy Camden's threat made the doctor turn pale. Over the last couple of years, the divorced doctor had developed a hungry dependency on cocaine and whores. To help pay for these out-of-control addictions, he had been writing prescriptions for all sorts of medicines worth plenty on the black market. That's how he got to know all sorts of colourful characters and became a local underworld under-the-counter doctor. As the surgeon gathered up what he needed to fix the gunshot wound, with Camden's help, Farrelly pulled out his mobile phone. Holding the phone to his ear with a bloodied hand, he made a call down south to stop an assassination. 4 weeks passed in peace as Farrelly recuperated at Camden's house on the shady banks of Ross River. During this time, Farrelly felt no need to make any moves. Back in Melbourne during the same period, Doug Lord announced his retirement and handed over the Lord Empire to Dane. A party was held to celebrate the reign of the new crime king, Dane Lord. It was the last function to be held at the Lord's country mansion. Nathan and Selena failed to attend. Battle-scarred and weary, Doug Lord retired to the Gold Coast for good. The only time Doug would return to Melbourne would be for weddings and funerals. Aware of what had transpired, Farrelly started to scheme as he convalesced in a comfortable chair under a large tree by Ross River. A master of disinformation, he spread rumours down south of his demise or escape overseas. He figured that this gossip might give him the element of surprise for future operations. However, he also knew that the more cunning and conniving in the Melbourne crime world would plan for his return. They knew Jason Farrelly was no paper tiger and that he would respond to the attempt on his life with a storm of savagery. The cunning and conniving were right, but there was more than revenge driving Farrelly's intentions now. Once a man has been shot and survived, he takes on a harder, sharper edge. He remembers what it's like to have been on the other end of a barrel, so he walks around like a man who will do whatever it takes to not let it happen again. So although Farrelly already had an aura about him, it seemed to have grown and intensified tenfold after he had been shot. Sammy Camden noticed this as the two of them walked out of Melbourne's Tullamarine Airport. 45 minutes drive from the airport, there is a cluster of shops on a main road in an inner suburb. One of these businesses was a beauty salon run and owned by Selena. The shop was frequented by the wives, girlfriends and mistresses of criminals. Also a regular user of the salon was Nathan Lord. Even though he was a drunk, he still took pride in his appearance. The salon was empty, except for a hairdresser who was talking on her phone as she sat by the front door. As the hairdresser finished her phone call, a dirty old 90s Holden sedan pulled up out the front of the business. A strongly built bloke with a tropical tan got out of the car and made his way into the shop. "We're closed," the young hairdresser said to the man as he walked through the doorway. "Yeah, I know." Without breaking stride, the mysterious man grabbed the young woman by the arm and gently escorted her out the back. A minute later, a black Bentley parked right behind the old sedan. Since Farrelly had gone off the scene, Nathan Lord had reverted to old habits. The new eye-catching Bentley was one of them. Having a predictable routine was another. The rock star hopped out of the black vehicle. Once his feet hit the footpath, he was surrounded by 4 bodyguards who, unlike their boss, were alert and ready for an attempt on his life. Just as the Lord boy was about to enter the salon, a minder hung back to inspect the Holden. "Hang on! Something's not right here," the henchman warned. The sedan exploded. Nathan and his crew were killed and atomised in an instant. The explosion levelled the salon and a couple of adjoining shops. Debris landed with a thud hundreds of metres away. The shockwave from the blast shook surrounding suburbs. Just as it had for the Roman noblemen of Pompey's cavalry, vanity, the only thing Nathan valued, led to his inevitable downfall. Farrelly was telling Sammy Camden this as they sat and surveyed the damage from inside a Nissan Ute parked further up the road from the bomb site. The only person to shed tears at Nathan Lord's memorial service was his mother, but a who's who of the Melbourne underworld did turn up and show their faces at the service. In a black suit, Farrelly stood up the back of the church by himself. He listened on as the priest conducting the service preached about peace and forgiveness. Once the service was over, mourners moved outside into a lush garden. In the sunshine, Farrelly hung back as everybody mingled, shook hands and gave their condolences to the family. The first to spot Farrelly was Doug Lord. He looked 1,000 years older than the day he and Farrelly had first met. "Sorry about your son, Doug," Farrelly stated with convincing sincerity as he shook hands with the former crime king. "Thanks, mate." Doug took a deep breath and changed the subject. "How are you going? I heard what happened up north." "Just a nick." With nothing more to be said, Doug smiled and shook hands with Farrelly again and wished him all the best in the future. Moments later, Selina turned away from a friend and marched towards Farrelly. She brushed by him and uttered furiously, "We need to talk. My office tomorrow." The following day, Selina was edgy as she sat in her office, where she did most of her plotting and scheming. As she sat and ate her salad, the man with whom she had much to discuss came into the office and walked up to her and said, "Did you think you could fuck me over and get away with it?" Without moving, Selina snapped, "I'm not the one who fucked you over." That was the first time Farrelly had heard Selina swear. 2 days earlier at the service, when she hissed at him, he realised that cracks were forming in that polite, calm facade she used to conceal her true self. Now the facade seemed to be crumbling. Farrelly sat down opposite Selina. She was clearly agitated. Her movements were hurried, and it seemed that the steel fork in her right hand could be used as a weapon at any second. "Dame was the one who put the contract out on you," she said. "Not us. Not me." "And you can prove this how?" Farrelly asked. According to Selina, at her behest, Nathan had visited his elder brother at the Smash Repairs workshop. As Dame was settling into his new office upstairs, Nathan, who was drunk and drugged up, charged in and demanded the throne. He shouted that if it wasn't handed over peacefully, he would take it by force. As Selina passionately relayed this story, Farrelly started to think. So it was then that Dane told Nathan that he was a hopeless junkie and a coward and was useless without you. He bragged that he'd position you for the kill with the help of one of your own men. When Selina had previously talked of maiming and murder, she did so casually, as if ordering a meal over the phone. This time, as she spoke about the act of killing, her words were filled with raw emotion. Now that someone close to her had been murdered in a brutal fashion, she understood how terrifying and soul-tearing the criminal world could be. Farrelly identified this and understood that at this point the young woman was drowning, so he decided to throw her a criminal life jacket that would allow her to survive and even prosper and satisfy his desires. "Are you still interested in what we planned?" "That's not possible now, thanks to you." "I think it is." Big Dane, the new boss, was sitting at his desk. He had just come back from a boozy lunch in the CBD with some of the power brokers that haunt the halls of power. Proud of himself for securing a large government contract, Dane had just turned on his computer when a call from his secretary came through. Sure. Send him up," Dane replied. Farrelly bounded up the stairs and entered Dane's office with confidence. The visitor's self-assured manner unnerved the new crime king. They shook hands and greeted each other, then sat down either side of Dane's desk. Strong rays from the sun shone into the office, stinging Farrelly's back. "You look like you've recovered well?" "Yeah, mate, just a flesh wound." Keen to get the uncomfortable meeting over and done with, Dane said, Look, first off, I'd like to thank you for all your work you've done for us. You took part of our organisation to another level, and I appreciate it. But I'm running things now, and at the moment, I don't see you fitting in with my plans." After his spiel, Dane looked at the man opposite him strangely. Farrelly was reclining back, smiling. "Dane, I'm not here begging for work. I want to know if you were the one that set me up in Townsville." No, I don't know anything about that." "Really? Because I made some inquiries. You sent one of my own team leaders up north to put a contract out on me, didn't you?" "Don't get me wrong, Dane. It was a good move. You take me out and there goes your brother's power base and the competition. Nah, good move, mate. Well done. It was Big Dane's turn to grin. Well, you almost got it right. His eyes and posture hardened. You see, Jason, you underestimated me, but I didn't underestimate you. Dane smugly explained how he knew very well that Farrelly would survive any attempt on his life by $2 Townsville crims. He factored in that Farrelly would think it was a scheming Selena who had got what she wanted from Farrelly and an insecure Nathan who had ordered his demise. Then Farrelly would go after Nathan and that snake Selena, as Dane described her. So there it is. Unwittingly, you did what I couldn't, Dane said before adding, now where do we go from here? Stunned at this development, Farrelly took a few seconds to deliberate and construct an answer. I guess you ought to know that I had you marked for death, but called it off once I was shot, so I think we're sort of even. Both men shrugged. They stood and shook hands for the last time. Later that night, the treacherous team leader who had betrayed Farrelly was sitting in his car outside a supermarket, waiting for his mistress to finish work. There was only one other vehicle in the poorly lit car park, and it had no one in it. The shaven-headed, goateed gangster was listening to music inside his Mercedes Roadster when a blue Toyota sedan pulled into the bay next to him. The driver of the sedan got out of the vehicle and made his way over to the Mercedes. Farrelly's former team leader recognised him as he got out of the Toyota, even though he was wearing a dark hooded jacket with the hood over his head. Farrelly was relaxed as he hopped into the Roadster's passenger seat. How's things going, bro? The crook inquired. Yeah, good, mate. So are you back? Nah. Farrelly pulled a pistol from out of his jacket. The gangster went for a weapon down beside his seat. Farrelly fired first. Crack! The shattered head of the crim bounced off the driver's window before coming to rest on the steering wheel. As the reckoning was taking place in the supermarket car park, Cody Lord was standing outside the padlocked gates of Lord's Smash Repairs. One of the two bodyguards inside the workshop's downstairs front office came out to the gates. In an upstairs office, Big Dane was working away in front of his computer. As he went over facts and figures, his dark-hooded younger cousin silently entered his office. Dane looked up. As he and Cody locked eyes, no words were needed to be traded. Instinctively understanding why his cousin was there, Dane went for a pistol in the top drawer of his desk. Cody advanced towards his cousin and drew his .357 Magnum from the front pocket of his hoodie. With the weapon raised in both hands, Cody aimed at the centre of Dane's chest. 4 rounds later, the big boss fell backwards off his leather chair onto the floor, but not after getting a shot off. Unharmed, Cody walked around Dane's desk and saw his cousin's large body bleeding profusely from the chest, his lifeless eyes staring up at the ceiling. Cody picked up the chair and sat down behind the desk. Seconds later, the two bodyguards cautiously peeked into the office from the doorway. What they saw was the unhooded Cody with his hands behind his head, leaning back in the leather chair. On the floor behind the newest of new crime kings was a large lump in a massive pool of thick blood. Get rid of that, the kid ordered, pointing over his shoulder with his thumb. Cody watched his henchman clumsily carry his cousin's corpse out the door. Elated but composed, he dialed a number on his mobile phone. The phone he rang was answered immediately. Is it done? Selena asked nervously. Yeah, we're in business. End of chapter 4.